"You're a pathetic excuse for a man," my father-in-law screamed, tearing up my report. "You're fired, effective immediately." My wife spat. "And the kids aren't yours. Get out of our lives." They gave me 30 minutes. But as I reached the door, their phones exploded with 99 plus urgent missed calls because... Chapter 1, Foundations of Glass. Silas Mercer navigated through life with surgical precision. At 42, he built an intelligence security firm from nothing, married into the wealthy Radcliffe family, and to all appearances, was living the American dream. The sprawling Connecticut estate, 2 teenagers who excelled in academics, and his position as the security advisor to his father-in-law's banking empire, everything seemed perfect. But Silas kept a part of himself locked away. Before becoming Silas Mercer, respectable businessman, he'd been something else entirely. A government operative whose skills went far beyond standard intelligence gathering. Skills he'd buried for 15 years when he met Veronica. That April morning, Silas stood in his home office overlooking the estate gardens, watching his wife of 17 years on her phone, pacing with unusual intensity. As chief of security for Radcliffe Financial, his reports often contained explosive information about potential threats to the company. Today's report would be different. It would detonate his entire life. "You've been quiet all week," Veronica said that evening. Her honey blonde hair cascading over shoulders bare, except for the thin straps of a designer dress he didn't recognize. "Is everything all right with the Phillips security assessment?" Silas studied her carefully. Veronica Radcliffe Mercer, 39, daughter of banking magnate Theodore Radcliffe, had always been poised and confident. Their marriage had begun as genuine love, or so he believed, before evolving into something more complicated. "Phillips isn't the issue," Silas replied, swirling his whiskey. "I'm more concerned about inconsistencies I've found in our personal accounts." A barely perceptible tightening around her eyes. "What inconsistencies? Large transfers? Unusual patterns? Nothing concrete yet?" He lied smoothly. "Theo needs that report tomorrow," she deflected. "He's been under immense pressure with the Monroe merger." Silas nodded. "I'm aware. The report will be ready." The teenagers, Parker, 17, and Faye, 15, burst into the kitchen with their usual chaotic energy. Neither looked particularly like Silas, but he'd never questioned it until now. "Mom, can I take the BMW tonight?" "Blake's having people over," Parker asked, his dark eyes so unlike Silas's blue ones, avoiding his stepfather's gaze. "Ask Silas," Veronica replied, suddenly intent on her phone. Parker turned reluctantly. "Can I, Silas? I'll be careful. Keys are in my office. On one condition, you pick up Faye from her dance class at 9. "But that's right in the middle of," Parker began. "Those are the terms." Silas cut him off, his tone brooking no argument. After the kids left, Veronica's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then stood abruptly. "I need to meet Lydia for drinks. She's having another crisis with Boyd." Another lie. Lydia Boyd's marriage was rock solid. Silas had verified this personally over the past month of surveillance. "Don't wait up," she added, kissing his cheek with practiced affection. After she left, Silas opened his laptop and reviewed the intelligence he'd gathered. GPS tracking showed Veronica's frequent visits to a downtown penthouse registered to Dominic Walsh, Theodore's smoothly ruthless legal counsel. Phone records revealed thousands of texts, and most damning paternity tests he'd secretly conducted showing neither Parker nor Faye carried his DNA. The pieces had fallen into place over the last 3 months, ever since he'd intercepted an email never meant for his eyes. Now he knew everything. How his life had been constructed as a convenient fiction. How his position at Radcliffe Financial had been exploited. And how tomorrow's security report would trigger the trap they'd set for him. Silas closed the laptop, his expression unreadable. He'd been betrayed before in his former life. Those who had crossed him then had learned a terrible lesson. Now history would repeat itself. But this time, on a much grander scale. He accessed a secure email account and used for 15 years and sent a simple message. "Phoenix requires activation. Timeline, immediate." Within minutes, the reply came. "Phoenix protocol initiated. Assets standing by." Chapter 2, Shadows and Evidence. The morning brought a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. Silas sat in his home gym at 5 a.m., methodically working through his training routine, a regimen far more intense than any normal security consultant would maintain. Between sets, he reviewed the final pieces of evidence on his specialized tablet. The GPS data from Veronica's car showed a pattern. Every Tuesday and Thursday she visited the penthouse while claiming charity committee meetings. On Saturdays when she claimed spa appointments, she and Dominic would meet at a lakeside cabin owned through a shell company connected to Theodore Radcliffe. More disturbing were the financial trails. For 7 years money had been systematically siphoned from accounts connected to Silas's security firm into offshore accounts controlled by Theodore and Dominic. They had been using his company as a front for something much darker. Laundering money for certain international clients whose activities would destroy Radcliffe Financial if exposed. The door to the gym opened, and Faye entered, already dressed for school in her private academy uniform. "Morning, Dad," she said, the term feeling hollow now that Silas knew the truth. "You're up early," he observed, setting down his weights. "AP Chem test today." She hesitated. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Are you and Mom okay? You both seem different lately." Silas considered her for a moment. Despite the betrayal, he couldn't help feeling a complex mixture of emotions toward the children he'd raised. "Why do you ask?" "I overheard Grandpa Theo talking to Mom yesterday. They stopped when I walked in, but it sounded serious." Her eyes, so similar to Dominic Walsh's, held genuine concern. "Sometimes adults have complex issues to work through," Silas said carefully. "Don't worry about it." After she left, Silas checked his watch. The board meeting where he was to present his security report would begin at 10 a.m. He showered and dressed with military precision, selecting a custom-tailored suit that concealed both his athletic build and the scars from his previous life. His phone buzzed with a text from an unlisted number. "Assets in position. Confirmation required." He replied with a single word, "Confirmed." At breakfast, Veronica was unusually attentive, refreshing his coffee and suggesting dinner plans for the evening. The performance almost impressed him. "Will you be home for dinner?" she asked. "I thought we could try that new place in Hartford. Let's see how the day goes," he replied noncommittally. Theodore seemed concerned about my report. A flash of something, anticipation, crossed her face. "I'm sure everything will work out exactly as it should." "I'm sure it will," he agreed. The double meaning lost on her. As Silas drove to Radcliffe Financial headquarters, he made 2 brief calls. The two a woman named Mara Koval, whose innocuous title of administrative consultant masked her true expertise in digital infrastructure. The two a man known only as Bishop, whose gruff acknowledgement confirmed that physical security measures were in place. At Radcliffe headquarters, Silas was greeted with unusual deference by the security team, men whose loyalty had been purchased by higher paychecks than his company officially provided. He nodded to them, knowing their role in what was to come. In his office, he found Dominic Walsh waiting, leaning casually against his desk. "Silas," the lawyer said with a practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Theodore asked me to review your report before the presentation." "Did he?" Silas opened his briefcase and withdrew a folder. "Here's the preliminary. The full report has additional sensitive details. I'll only present directly to the board." Dominic scanned the document, his expression shifting subtly. "This isn't what we discussed, isn't it?" Silas maintained a neutral expression. "The Moore situation, you were supposed to emphasize the external threats, not the internal vulnerabilities." Dominic's voice held an edge of warning. "I go where the evidence leads me, Dominic. That's what Theodore pays me for." The lawyer's charm evaporated. "This could destabilize relationships we've spent years cultivating." "Indeed," Silas agreed. "Relationships are fragile things." As Dominic left, visibly unsettled, Silas received another text, "Secondary targets under surveillance. Extraction team ready." He replied, "Proceed as planned. No deviations." At 9:58 a.m., Silas gathered his materials and headed toward the boardroom, passing Veronica, who was supposedly visiting for a charity meeting. Their eyes met, and she gave him an encouraging smile that turned his stomach. "Knock him dead, darling," she said. "Someone certainly will," he replied quietly. Chapter 3: The Detonation. The Radcliffe Financial boardroom exuded old money and power. Handcrafted mahogany table, leather chairs, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Hartford skyline. 8 board members waited with Theodore Radcliffe at the head, his silver hair and tailored suit projecting the authority that had built his banking empire. Dominic Walsh sat at Theodore's right hand, whispering something urgent as Silas arranged his presentation materials. Veronica had slipped in quietly, taking a seat near the back, unusual for a security briefing. "Gentlemen and Miss Chambers," Theodore began, nodding to the lone female board member. "Silas has prepared an assessment of our current security vulnerabilities." "Silas, the floor is yours." Silas stood, buttoning his jacket. Thank you, Mr. Radcliffe. Today's report differs somewhat from my usual assessments. He distributed sealed folders to each board member. Please don't open these until instructed. Dominic shifted uncomfortably. Perhaps we should skip directly to the Moore situation. We'll get there, Silas assured him coldly. I need to address a more immediate security breach. He activated the presentation screen, showing a complex financial diagram. For the past 7 years, Radcliffe Financial has been exposed to significant internal threats that compromise not just the company's integrity, but potentially its very existence. Theodore's expression hardened. What exactly are you implying? Not implying, stating. Silas advanced to the next slide showing transaction records. These are transfers from shell companies established under my security firm's umbrella, without my knowledge, moving funds for clients whose identities would horrify this board and trigger immediate federal investigation. The boardroom erupted in confused murmurs. Dominic stood. This is preposterous. Please open your folders, Silas continued calmly. Inside each was detailed evidence of Theodore and Dominic's scheme, including offshore accounts, client lists with names redacted, and most damningly, recorded conversations. This is outrageous. Theodore slammed his hand on the table. You've clearly manufactured this evidence. Have I? Silas pressed a button on his phone, and audio filled the room. Theodore's voice discussing how to use Silas's company as a front, mentioning how convenient it was that his son-in-law remained oblivious. The board members looked stunned. Theodore's face flushed with fury. You ungrateful bastard, he hissed. After everything I've done for you, I'm not finished, Silas said evenly. There's the matter of personal betrayal as well. Another slide appeared. DNA test results for Parker and Faye, alongside Dominic Walsh's profile. Veronica gasped, rising from her seat. Silas, stop this immediately. You've all been played, Silas told the board. Used as unwitting accomplices in illegal operations, federal authorities are currently seizing evidence from multiple locations. However, I've prepared a contingency that could mitigate the damage to innocent parties within Radcliffe Financial. He detailed a restructuring plan that would isolate the contaminated sections of the business while preserving the legitimate operations, a lifeline the board clearly recognized. Theodore's rage boiled over. He snatched the report from the table and tore it violently. You're a pathetic excuse for a man, he screamed. You think anyone here will believe these lies? Veronica stormed forward, her perfectly composed facade crumbling. You're fired, effective immediately. And the kids aren't yours. They never were. Get out of our lives. Silas calmly gathered his belongings. I've been given 30 minutes to clear out my office. I understand. Consider yourself lucky we don't have you arrested for corporate espionage, Dominic added, standing protectively beside Veronica. As Silas reached the boardroom door, he turned back. One last thing, you might want to check your phones. It seems there's something urgent requiring your attention. At that moment, every phone in the room exploded with notifications. Theodore's face went ashen as he looked at his screen showing 99+ missed calls. What have you done? He whispered. The question isn't what I've done, Silas replied coldly. It's what you've done. And now, what happens next is entirely out of your hands. He walked out, closing the door on the erupting chaos. In the hallway, Mara Cavell waited, tablet in hand. All systems compromised as requested, she reported. Federal teams are moving on the secondary locations, and the special package has been delivered to media outlets with the 1-hour timer active. Perfect, Silas said. And our exit strategy? Already in motion. Transport waiting at the secondary location. As they walked toward the elevator, the building's alarms began to wail. Security personnel rushed past them, heading toward the boardroom. 15 years of my life, Silas said quietly. All a carefully constructed lie. The children? Mara asked. His expression hardened. They made their choice when they participated in the surveillance. They're legally adults now in the eyes of what's coming. The elevator doors closed as shouts echoed down the hallway behind them. Phase 1 was complete. Now the real work would begin. Chapter 4. Ashes and Architects. 6 hours after walking out of Radcliffe Financial, Silas sat in a modest hotel room in Albany, watching chaos unfold on multiple news channels. Banking giant Radcliffe Financial, raided by federal authorities, scrolled across the bottom of every screen. They're calling it the largest financial scandal of the decade, Mara observed, monitoring social media reactions on her laptop. Theodore and Dominic were taken into custody an hour ago. Preliminary charges include money laundering, wire fraud, and racketeering. Silas nodded, his face impassive. And Veronica? Currently being questioned as a person of interest. Her phones and computers had been seized. The phase had executed flawlessly. The evidence Silas had gathered over months, supplemented by data extracted through Mara's specialized skills, had triggered simultaneous raids on 17 locations associated with the illegal operations. They missed calls that had flooded. Everyone's phones came from panicked associates, attorneys and co-conspirators, as the carefully constructed house of cards collapsed. But this was merely the foundation of Silas's revenge. Bishop reports the extraction of all physical assets is complete, Mara continued. The contents of your hidden safe, the backup drives, and the items from the storage units have been secured. And the children? Silas asked, his voice carefully neutral. Parker fled campus when the news broke. Currently at his girlfriend's house, Faye is with Veronica's sister Miranda. Silas considered this. The past months of surveillance had revealed that both teenagers had been aware of at least portions of the deception. Parker had actively assisted in monitoring Silas's activities, reporting to Theodore and Dominic. Faye's involvement was less direct but still present. She had deliberately misled Silas multiple times about her mother's whereabouts. The betrayal cut deeper than he would admit. His phone vibrated with a message from an unknown number. Phoenix assets deployed to secondary targets, awaiting authorization for Phase 2. Silas typed his response. Initiate at midnight. No exceptions. You should rest, Mara suggested. Tomorrow will require clarity. I've operated on less sleep in worse conditions, he replied. But he did recline on the bed, staring at the ceiling. 15 years, Mara. I let myself become weak. She gave him a knowing look. You became human. There's a difference. Not in our world. The old world, perhaps. But now you're building something new from the ashes. Silas closed his eyes, allowing memories to surface. Memories of his life before Veronica. Before the false security of family. He had been Phoenix then, a government operative specializing in dismantling organizations from within. His skills had made him valuable to agencies that didn't officially exist, handling situations that couldn't be acknowledged. When he'd met Veronica at a cybersecurity conference, he'd already been in transition, creating a legitimate life. Their connection had seemed genuine. Her father's offer to bring his expertise to Radcliffe Financial had appeared to be recognition of his legitimate talents. All lies. He discovered the truth by accident 3 months ago. An encrypted email mistakenly routed to his server, detailing how Theodore planned to frame him for the illegal operations if authorities ever got close. 17 years of marriage built on a foundation of exploitation and lies. The television continued to broadcast images of Radcliffe executives being escorted from buildings in handcuffs. One anchor speculated on the source of the evidence, noting its comprehensive and damning nature. They're calling you a whistleblower, Mara noted with irony. Let them believe whatever narrative serves our purposes, Silas replied. It provides useful cover. His phone chimed with another message, this one displaying a series of numbers representing account balances. In the financial chaos, billions were shifting rapidly. Markets were reacting to Radcliffe's implosion, creating opportunities that Silas's hidden algorithms were exploiting microsecond by microsecond. By morning, Theodore's fortune would be decimated. But more importantly, control of key assets would be transferred through an intricate web of transactions that even the best forensic accountants would need months to unravel. Silas rose and approached the window, looking out at the city lights. Contact our people in Zurich. Tell them to accelerate the timetable, and I want hourly reports on Dominic's legal maneuvers. Already happening, Mara confirmed. His attorneys have filed emergency motions, but Judge Holloway denied them. Holloway, Silas repeated with satisfaction. Another piece carefully positioned years ago, a federal judge whose career had been quietly saved by one of Silas's anonymous interventions. What about Veronica's sister? Miranda could become problematic with Faye, Mara noted. Miranda has her own secrets, Silas replied coldly. Bishop will pay her a visit tomorrow. She'll surrender Faye to child services rather than risk exposure. The night deepened as they continued preparations. At precisely midnight, Silas received confirmation that Phase 2 had begun. A coordinated series of revelations to key media contacts, financial institutions, and regulatory authorities that would ensure no recovery was possible for the Radcliffe empire. By dawn, he had slept exactly 3 hours. All he needed to function at optimal capacity. The news had evolved overnight. With Theodore Radcliffe's face now emblazoned across every channel above headlines declaring the collapse of his banking empire. Mara entered with coffee and a secure tablet. Phoenix Assets report all Phase 2 objectives achieved. Dominic Walsh's legal team has withdrawn representation citing irreconcilable conflicts of interest. And this just came in. She handed him the tablet showing surveillance footage of Veronica leaving a police station, surrounded by reporters, shouting questions. Her perfect composure had vanished, replaced by barely controlled panic. "Where will she go?" Mara asked. "Her mother's estate in Greenwich," Silas replied without hesitation. "It's the only property not directly connected to Theodore's finances. She'll believe it's safe." He set down his coffee. Time to move to the next phase. Prepare the Greenwich team. Chapter 5. Ghosts and Architects. The Greenwich estate sat on 3 manicured acres, a colonial revival mansion that had belonged to Veronica's mother's family for generations. Security was minimal, a gated entrance, basic alarm system, and the illusion of privacy afforded by old money and influential neighbors. From a nondescript van parked half a mile away, Silas monitored thermal imaging showing 3 heat signatures inside the main building. Veronica, an older woman likely to be the housekeeper, and a figure that intel confirmed was Lydia Chambers, Veronica's closest friend and confidant. "Perimeter sensors active," reported Bishop, a compact man whose military bearing couldn't be disguised by civilian clothes. "All communications into and out of the property are being intercepted." Silas nodded. "What's their conversation?" Bishop adjusted a dial, bringing the women's voices into clarity through the directional microphones aimed at the house's windows. "Completely blindsided me," Veronica was saying, her voice shaking with emotion that Silas recognized as rage rather than sorrow. How could he have gathered all that evidence without anyone noticing? "The question is what he's planning next," Lydia replied. "A man doesn't just walk away after something like this." "He's nothing," Veronica spat. "A useful tool that outlived his purpose. Once my father's lawyers contained this situation." "Veronica," Lydia interrupted, "your father's being held without bail. The evidence is overwhelming. This isn't going away." There was a sound of glass shattering. Veronica's temper manifesting physically. "That life I built, 17 years pretending to love that empty shell of a man. The perfect wife. The perfect mother. For what? To watch it all collapse because he somehow grew a spine?" Silas's expression remained impassive, but his fingers tightened almost imperceptibly on the armrest. "What about the children?" Lydia asked. "Parker's smart. He's already distancing himself, staying with Blake's family. Faye's with Miranda for now, but we need to get her somewhere more secure. If anything happens to those kids, nothing will happen to them," Lydia assured her. "Silas may be vindictive, but he wouldn't hurt children." Veronica laughed bitterly. "You don't know him like I do. There was always something inhuman underneath that polished exterior, something cold that I could never quite reach." "I should check on Faye," Lydia said. "Miranda called earlier, said she was having trouble getting through to you." A phone rang in the background. Veronica answered, her voice shifting instantly to one of concern. "Miranda? What's wrong? What do you mean people came for Faye? Who? What?" Silas switched off the audio. "Phase 3 initiated," he noted calmly. "Team reports the girl is secure," Bishop confirmed. "Being transported to the designated facility now. And Parker? Our people at the Blake residence are in position. Extraction on your command." Silas checked his watch. "Not yet. Let him feel secure for another few hours. It will make the extraction cleaner when he believes the danger has passed." The van's communication system chimed with an encrypted message from Mara. "Federal custody of primary targets confirmed. Secondary financial conversions complete at 94%. Media package delivering maximum impact. Recommend accelerating timeline for Zurich assets." "She's right," Bishop noted, reading over Silas's shoulder. "The financial markets are moving faster than anticipated. We should trigger the Zurich protocols immediately." Silas considered this, then nodded. "Initiate Zurich now, and tell the Greenwich team to move in 30 minutes. Bishop raised an eyebrow. "That's significantly ahead of schedule. The psychological impact would be more effective if we wait until nightfall." "Psychological impact is already achieved," Silas replied. "Veronica just learned her daughter has been taken by unknown parties. Her son will follow. Every foundation of her life is being systematically destroyed. Now we deliver the final message in person." As Bishop coordinated the teams, Silas opened a secure case containing specialized equipment, non-standard communications devices, identification packages, and a small but significant arsenal that wouldn't trigger standard security scans. "You're going in personally?" Bishop asked, surprise evident in his voice. "Some messages need to be delivered face-to-face." 30 minutes later, Silas approached the front door of the Greenwich estate, dressed in an impeccable suit indistinguishable from those he'd worn as Radcliffe Financial Security Chief. The only difference was the weight of the custom handgun concealed beneath his jacket. He rang the doorbell calmly through his earpiece. He could hear the conversation inside freeze. Who could that be? Lydia's voice. "Don't answer it," Veronica hissed. The housekeeper's voice. "The security camera isn't working." After a moment of hesitation, footsteps approached. The door opened to reveal the housekeeper, Mrs. Winters, whose eyes widened in recognition. "Mr. Mercer," she exclaimed. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Winters," Silas replied pleasantly. "I need to speak with my wife. It's urgent." Before she could respond, Veronica appeared behind her, face contorted with fury. "How dare you come here? Get out before I call the police." "The police are rather busy with your father's case," Silas replied, stepping inside despite her protests. "And your phones aren't working anyway." He nodded to Lydia, who stood frozen in the hallway. "Miss Chambers, I'm surprised to see you here, given your husband's sudden audit problems." The color drained from Lydia's face. "What do you mean?" "The IRS seems very interested in certain offshore accounts connected to your family trust." Curious timing. Veronica stepped forward, trembling with rage. "Where's my daughter?" "What have you done with Faye?" "Where is my daughter, you mean?" Silas corrected her. "The one I raised for 15 years believing she was mine." "She was never yours." Veronica spat. "Neither of them were. You were just a convenient father figure while you built your little empire on my back," Silas finished. "Using my company, my expertise and my blind spot. The family I thought was real." The calculated calmness of his response seemed to unnerve Veronica more than any show of anger would have. She took an unconscious step backward. "What do you want?" she demanded. "I came to deliver a message," Silas replied. "Everything you and your father and Dominic built is gone. The offshore accounts, the shell companies, the hidden assets, all seized or redirected. Your children are being taken to a secure location where they'll be well cared for during the coming storm." "You can't just take them," Veronica cried. "I already have," Silas replied simply. "Consider it the payment for 17 years of lies." "Is that all you came to say?" Lydia interjected, finding her voice to gloat. "No," Silas said, his gaze returning to Veronica. "I came to tell you that this is just the beginning. You thought you knew me, controlled me, used me. You didn't even scratch the surface of who I really am." He stepped closer, his voice dropping so only Veronica could hear him. "Before I met you, I destroyed people for a living. Organizations, corrupt officials, entire networks, they disappeared because of me. I buried that life when I married you, believing I could have something real. Thank you for reminding me who I truly am." Veronica's expression shifted from defiance to the flickers of genuine fear. "What are you going to do?" "Everything," Silas replied simply. "And you'll never see it coming." As he turned to leave, Veronica lunged for a decorative sculpture on a nearby table, swinging it wildly at his head. With reflexes that shocked her, Silas caught her wrist mid-swing, applying precise pressure that caused her fingers to release the improvised weapon. "Don't make this physical, Veronica," he advised quietly. "It's an arena where you can't possibly win." He released her and walked calmly to the door. "Oh, and the estate security system has been compromised for months. Every conversation, every meeting, every indiscretion with Dominic in your mother's bed, all documented. The file copies are already with the federal investigators." As he pulled the door close behind him, he heard Veronica's anguished scream of rage and fear. The sound of someone realizing that their entire world was truly collapsing. In the car waiting at the end of the driveway, Bishop sat at the wheel. "Satisfying." "It's not about satisfaction," Silas replied. "It's about consequences. Take me to see the children." Chapter 6. Webs and Consequences. The secure facility outside New Haven resembled a high-end private school more than a detention center. Deliberate camouflage for its actual purpose as a transitional holding location for protected witnesses and high-value intelligence assets, Silas had called in significant favors from his past life to arrange temporary custody of Parker and Faye here. As he entered the administrative building, a tall woman with close-cropped silver hair greeted him with a nod that acknowledged their shared history. "Director Sullivan," Silas said, Thank you for accommodating this unusual request. Phoenix, she replied, using his old operational designation. When you reached out after 15 years of silence, I assumed it would be interesting. I underestimated the scale. They walked through secured corridors toward a residential wing. The teenagers are in separate observation suites, Sullivan explained. The girl is frightened, but composed. The boy is, she paused, searching for the right word. Volatile. I expected as much, Silas replied. What's their current understanding of the situation? They know their grandfather and mother are involved in a major financial scandal. They know you orchestrated the exposure. They don't know you're here, or that you arranged their protective custody. They stopped outside a viewing room with one-way glass. On the other side, Faye sat on a bed. Her school uniform replaced by generic civilian clothes. Her expression a mixture of confusion and fear. She's been asking about her mother, Sullivan noted. And about you? What has she said about me? Silas asked, studying the girl he'd raised from infancy. She seems genuinely confused about your role in all this. Claims she never knew about whatever her mother and grandfather were involved in. Silas's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. The surveillance tells a different story. She actively participated in monitoring my movements, reporting to her mother. Children often participate in family deceptions without understanding the bigger picture, Sullivan observed, especially when manipulated by authority figures they trust. She's 15, not 5, Silas replied coldly. Old enough to understand basic loyalty. Sullivan studied him. You didn't bring them here for a family reunion. What's your actual plan for these kids? They're leverage, Silas answered honestly, and they need to be contained during what comes next. Their presence would complicate the final phases. And afterward, once everything is complete, they'll be released to whatever remains of their mother's family, with enough financial resources to ensure their education and basic needs, but nothing more. Sullivan nodded without judgment. And you want to speak with them now? Just the boy, Silas decided. Faye's role was secondary. Parker was an active participant in the deception, Theodore's protege in training. He deserves to understand the consequences. In another wing, Parker paced his room like a caged animal, his handsome features, so similar to Dominic Walsh's, twisted with anger. When Silas entered, the boy froze. You, he spat. What have you done? Where's my mother? Silas closed the door, noting how Parker unconsciously backed away despite his hostile posture. Your mother is currently watching her world collapse, Silas replied calmly. Much like you are. They'll destroy you for this, Parker threatened. You have no idea who you're dealing with. The comment almost made Silas smile. That's precisely what this situation is revealing, that none of you had any idea who you were dealing with. He gestured to a chair. Sit down, Parker. I'm only going to have this conversation once. Something in Silas's tone, a dangerous edge that had never been present in his stepfather persona, made Parker comply despite his defiance. For 7 years you've been reporting on my activities to your grandfather and biological father, Silas stated. Logging my movements, photographing documents, installing monitoring software on my devices. Did you ever question why? Parker's expression flickered with surprise at the extent of Silas's knowledge. They said you were dangerous, that we needed insurance against you eventually turning on the family. And you believe that? Despite never seeing evidence of this alleged danger. I saw the files, Parker insisted. Reports about your background. Things you've done before marrying Mom. Now Silas did smile, cold and humorless. Fabricated files designed to justify their exploitation of my company and expertise. Tell me, what exactly did these reports claim I'd done? Parker hesitated. They said you'd been involved in corporate espionage, that you'd sold sensitive information and disappeared people who got in your way. Close, but fundamentally wrong. Silas replied. I didn't sell information, I gathered it for agencies that don't officially exist. And the people who disappeared deserve their fate. Terrorists, arms dealers, human traffickers. He leaned forward. Your grandfather and father were using my security firm to launder money for clients who would have appalled even you. And when exposure became inevitable, they planned to frame me as the mastermind. I don't believe you, Parker said, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. I don't care what you believe, Silas replied evenly. Your role in this drama is nearly complete. Soon, you'll be released to whatever family remains willing to claim you. You'll have sufficient resources for education and basic needs. But the lifestyle you've enjoyed is over. You can't just, I already have. Silas cut him off. Every account, every property, every asset connected to the Radcliffe name has been seized, frozen, or redistributed. Your grandfather will die in prison. Your biological father will follow. Your mother will be left with nothing but the consequences of her choices. Parker's composure cracked. Why are you telling me this? Just to be cruel? No, Silas said, standing. I'm telling you because you should understand that actions have consequences. For 17 years, I gave you everything a father could give. And you betrayed that without a thought because it was convenient. You weren't my real father, Parker said bitterly. No, Silas agreed. And that's the only reason you're sitting here safely, instead of experiencing the full measure of what happens to those who betray me. He moved to the door, then paused. One last thing. The trust fund Theodore established for you and Faye? I've redirected it to fund rehabilitation programs for the victims of your grandfather's financial schemes. Consider it your and only contribution to making amends. As he left, Parker called after him. She never loved you. Not for a single day. Silas didn't bother responding. It no longer mattered. Outside, Director Sullivan waited. Productive? Necessary, Silas replied. How long can you keep them secured? As agreed, 48 hours. After that, they become a legal complication neither of us wants. 48 hours is sufficient, Silas confirmed. By then, everything will be irreversible. Sullivan studied him with professional assessment. The Phoenix I knew was effective but measured. This seems personal. It is personal, Silas acknowledged. But the methodology remains professional. As they walked back toward the exit, Sullivan asked, was any of it real? Your life with them? For a moment, something resembling genuine emotion crossed Silas's face. I believed it was. That's why this has to be absolute. Outside the facility, Mara waited with updates on multiple operations now in motion across 3 continents. The complex web of financial algorithms Silas had designed was systematically dismantling Theodore Radcliffe's empire, redirecting assets through untraceable channels, while simultaneously exposing the darkest secrets of his business practices to authorities worldwide. Dominic Walsh's attorneys have withdrawn, Mara reported, as they drove away. The evidence packets we sent them apparently convinced them their client is indefensible. And the special project for Veronica? Silas asked. Ready for implementation at your command, Mara confirmed. Though I should note, it crosses lines that can't be uncrossed. Silas looked out at the passing landscape. Those lines were crossed the day they decided to use my life as collateral. He activated a secure communication device. Initiate Omega Protocol, all targets, no exceptions. With those words, the final phase began. A comprehensive destruction of everything the Radcliffe family had built, owned, or touched over 3 generations. Not just financial ruin, but complete erasure from the institutions and social structures that had protected them for decades. It's done, Silas said quietly. Now we watch it burn. Chapter 7. Fall and Fury. Within 24 hours of Silas activating Omega Protocol, the Radcliffe empire imploded with spectacular finality. Federal indictments expanded from financial crimes to include racketeering, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and evidence tampering. Theodore Radcliffe, once celebrated on the covers of financial magazines, became the face of corporate corruption across every news outlet. From a secure operations center established in a converted warehouse, Silas monitored the collapse through multiple information streams. Financial terminals displayed the free fall of stocks connected to Radcliffe Holdings. News broadcasts showed federal agents raiding properties across 3 states. Social media exploded with revelations about the family's excesses and corruption. Dominic Walsh has agreed to testify against Theodore, Mara reported, scanning real-time updates from court filings, offering evidence in exchange for consideration and sentencing. Predictable, Silas noted. Status on Veronica? Left the Greenwich estate 3 hours ago. Currently at the Benedict Hotel under an assumed name, she's made 17 attempts to contact various associates, all rejected. Financial access is completely severed. Her last 3 credit cards were declined. On a monitor, surveillance footage showed Veronica in the hotel lobby. Her designer clothes now rumpled, her composure cracking as a receptionist explained that her card had been declined. The woman who had navigated high society with effortless grace was visibly unraveling. Bishop entered with a secure tablet. Federal authorities are requesting informal cooperation from the anonymous whistleblower who provided the initial evidence. They're offering immunity guarantees through established channels. Decline politely, Silas instructed. Our involvement ends with the evidence provided. Let their own investigators connect the remaining dots. They'll eventually identify you as the source, Bishop noted. By which time we'll have completed the extraction and transition, Silas replied. The person they'll be looking for won't exist anymore. Another monitor showed footage of Parker and Faye being released from the secure facility into the custody of Veronica's aunt, an elderly woman who had remained distant from Theodore's business dealings. The teenagers looked shell-shocked. Their privileged world completely upended. Financial provisions for the children are complete, Mara confirmed. Trust established through neutral parties, accessible for educational expenses and basic needs. Contingency monitors in place to prevent interference. Silas nodded without comment, his attention shifting to another screen showing the interior of an opulent penthouse being systematically dismantled by federal agents. Dominic Walsh's primary residence, where Veronica had spent countless afternoons when supposedly attending charity events. The special package for Veronica? He asked. Delivered to her hotel room as instructed. Bishop confirmed. Surveillance active. One of the monitors switched to a hotel room view. Veronica entered, throwing her purse onto the bed in frustration. She noticed a package on the desk, a simple box with no markings. After a moment's hesitation, she opened it. Inside was a single USB drive and a handwritten note. The cameras couldn't capture the note's contents, but Silas knew what it said, the truth, in your own words. Veronica stared at the items, then plugged the drive into her laptop. Her expression shifted from confusion to horror as the screen displayed what appeared to be video files. Audio confirmation? Silas asked. Mara activated the room's surveillance feed. Veronica's voice filled the operations center, in recorded form from the video she was watching, then her live reaction. "Oh my God," she whispered, watching herself on screen discussing Silas with Dominic. "He's so pathetically devoted. It makes manipulating him almost too easy." Another clip played. Veronica with Theodore. "How much longer do we need to maintain this charade? I'm tired of playing the perfect wife to that empty shell." And, most damning, Veronica instructing teenage Parker, "Your stepfather can never know about your real father. Watch him carefully. Report anything unusual. We need to ensure our insurance policy remains viable." The videos continued. Years of private conversations, secret meetings, intimate moments with Dominic. All meticulously recorded through the very security systems Silas had installed to protect the family. Veronica slammed the laptop closed, trembling with rage and fear. "Silas!" she screamed at the empty room, somehow knowing he was watching. "You bastard!" She grabbed her phone, dialing frantically. After several attempts, someone finally answered. "Lydia? Thank God. I need help. Silas has recordings. Everything. He's been spying on us for years." She paused, listening to the response, her expression crumbling. "What do you mean you can't help? Lydia, please. Hello? Hello?" The call had ended. Veronica tried another number, then another, each attempt more desperate than the last. No one was answering. In the operations center, Silas watched impassively. "Status on the Zurich transfer? Complete," Mara confirmed. "Assets secured and distributed according to protocol. The foundation accounts are active and anonymized." This represented the final conversion of resources Silas had quietly extracted from the Radcliffe empire. Not for personal gain, but redirected to fund an organization that would continue long after his disappearance. A foundation dedicated to exposing and dismantling operations similar to Theodore's, protecting those exploited by the powerful. Theodore's legal team has requested an emergency hearing, Bishop noted, claiming evidence tampering and procedural violations. "They won't find any," Silas replied confidently. "Every piece of evidence was obtained legally through systems I had legitimate access to as chief security officer. Their own recklessness created the vulnerability." On the monitor, Veronica had moved from desperate calls to frantic packing, stuffing clothes into a suitcase while continuously glancing at the door as if expecting it to burst open at any moment. "She's planning to run," Mara observed. "With what resources?" Silas asked rhetorically. "Every account is frozen. Every contact has abandoned her. Even her passport has been flagged in the system. Not necessarily for legal reasons," Bishop noted with professional admiration. "The thoroughness of this operation exceeds anything we did in our government days. Because this time, it's personal," Silas replied, his voice devoid of emotion despite the words. A secure communication channel activated, displaying a message from Director Sullivan, Federal Task Force expanding investigation to Ratcliffe Associates. Your window is closing. Recommend accelerating exit timeline. She's right, Mara said. We should initiate the final extraction now. Silas considered this, watching Veronica's increasing desperation on the monitor. Not yet. One last loose end to address. He activated a command sequence on his terminal. In the hotel room, Veronica's phone rang. She stared at it with suspicion, then tentatively answered. Hello, Veronica. Silas's voice, calm and measured. You monster, she hissed. You've destroyed everything. No, Veronica. You destroyed everything the moment you decided to build your life on lies. What do you want? Haven't you taken enough? I wanted you to understand something, Silas replied evenly. This isn't just revenge. It's justice. For 17 years of exploitation. For using me as a front for criminal operations. For lying about the children. The children, she gasped. Where are they? What have you done with them? They're safe with your Aunt Eleanor. With sufficient resources for their basic needs, but nothing more. The privilege and excess they've enjoyed is over. Veronica's voice turned pleading. Silas. Please. Whatever you think I've done, the children are innocent. Parker actively spied on me for years, Silas replied coldly. Faye deliberately misled me about your activities. They chose their side. They're just kids. They did what their mother and grandfather asked. Actions have consequences, Veronica. That's the final lesson in all of this. Her tone changed. Desperation, giving way to fury. You think this is over? That you've won? You have no idea what my father is capable of, even from prison. He has connections you can't begin to imagine. Had, Silas corrected. Past tense. Every connection has been severed, exposed, or neutralized. There's nothing left of the Radcliffe influence. Nothing left of the life you knew. I'll find you, she threatened. Wherever you go, whatever you become, I'll find you, and I'll make you pay for this. No, Veronica. You won't, Silas replied with absolute certainty. Because after tonight, Silas Mercer will cease to exist. Just as your life as you knew it has ceased to exist. He ended the call and turned to his team. Initiate final extraction. We're done here. As they began shutting down the operations center, wiping systems and preparing for departure, Bishop asked, Was it worth it? 17 years of your life for this moment? Silas paused, considering the question. It wasn't about worth, it was about correction. They tried to use me as a tool. They forgot that tools can be dangerous when turned against their users. Outside, the hints of dawn illuminated the horizon. By nightfall, Silas Mercer would be gone, erased as thoroughly as he had erased the Radcliffe Empire. In his place, a new identity would emerge, continuing the work he had begun before Veronica, before the illusion of family had temporarily diverted him. The Phoenix would rise again, but this time, operating by his own rules rather than those of agencies and handlers. The foundation established with redirected Radcliffe assets would become his new mission, identifying and dismantling operations that exploited the vulnerable that hid behind facades of respectability while building empires on corruption. It's time, Mara announced, the final systems wiped clean. Silas took one last look at the monitor showing Veronica, now slumped on the hotel room floor, the full weight of her new reality finally sinking in. Then he turned away, closing that chapter with the same precision that had defined every aspect of his operation. The game was over, and he had won. Chapter 8. Ghosts and Reckoning. 6 months after the destruction of the Radcliffe Empire, a man who no longer called himself Silas Mercer sat at a cafe in Zurich, reading news updates on a specialized tablet. Theodore Radcliffe had been sentenced to 32 years in federal prison after a trial that exposed decades of financial crimes. Dominic Walsh had received 18 years despite his cooperation, the judges finding his testimony self-serving and incomplete. And Veronica, the woman he had once believed loved him, had avoided prison but lost everything else. The most recent photos showed her leaving a courthouse after finalizing divorce proceedings, her designer clothes replaced by off-the-rack business, where her once perfect appearance now marked by the strain of dramatic downfall. Still monitoring the aftermath? Asked Mara, joining him with 2 espressos. I thought we agreed to leave that life behind. Knowledge is security, he replied, accepting the coffee. And old habits persist. In the months since orchestrating the Radcliffe collapse, he had established a new identity. Gabriel Shaw, international security consultant with specialized expertise in identifying financial vulnerabilities. This cover provided perfect legitimate access to the systems and information needed for his true purpose, directing the Phoenix Foundation's operations against targets similar to Theodore Radcliffe. The Watson operation is ready to proceed, Mara noted, referring to their current project. A human trafficking network operating behind a legitimate shipping company. Final authorization needed. Approved, he replied. Full spectrum response. His phone vibrated with a secure message, a regular update on the monitoring of certain individuals from his previous life. Parker had dropped out of his prestigious university, now working entry-level positions while struggling with the adjustment to normal life. Faye had adapted better, reportedly focusing on academics with new determination. You still track them, Mara observed. The children. Potential variables require monitoring, he replied neutrally. Variables or vulnerabilities? She pressed. Before he could respond, another secure alert appeared, this one marked with highest priority. He opened it to find surveillance photographs of Veronica entering a building in Geneva, followed by interior footage showing her meeting with a man whose face triggered immediate recognition protocols. Alexander Kazan, he identified. Former FSB, now private contractor specializing in hostile extractions and targeted eliminations. She's looking for you, Mara realized. Despite everything, she's still pursuing revenge. As predicted, he replied calmly. Her psychological profile indicated a 78% probability of obsessive response rather than acceptance. This changes our timeline, Mara noted. We should accelerate relocation protocols. He considered this, studying the images of Veronica with the Russian operative. The woman in the photos bore little resemblance to the polished socialite he had married. Her features were harder, her expression haunted by bitterness and obsession. No, he decided. We don't run. We address this directly. Direct confrontation increases exposure risk by 43%, he finished. Acceptable parameters given the alternative of perpetual evasion, he activated a secure communication channel. Bishop, we have a situation requiring immediate response. Kazan Protocol, Geneva location, full containment. Within an hour, operatives connected to the Phoenix Foundation had established surveillance on both Veronica and Kazan. Reports flowed in detailing the Russians' movements, his contacts, the resources Veronica had somehow assembled to fund this vendetta. From a secure apartment overlooking Lake Geneva, he monitored the operation personally. The confrontation with Veronica's hired hunter would need to be definitive, not just neutralizing the immediate threat, but ending her pursuit permanently. Kazan is moving, Bishop reported via secure channel, heading toward the hotel district with specialized equipment. Interception point. Recommended location is the parking structure on Rue du Mont Blanc. Minimal civilian exposure, multiple exit routes. Approved, he confirmed. Non-lethal protocols and less escalation is unavoidable. Though he had taken lives in his former role as a government operative, the Phoenix Foundation operated by different rules. Elimination was a last resort used only when all other options had been exhausted. As darkness fell over Geneva, he prepared personally for the confrontation, selecting equipment with practiced efficiency, non-standard tactical gear, concealed beneath tailored civilian clothing, communications devices with redundant systems, and contingency tools that reflected the severity of the threat. Veronica is not at her hotel, Mara reported suddenly. Surveillance lost her 20 minutes ago. This was unexpected. Expand search parameters. Check transportation hubs and alternate accommodations already initiated, she confirmed. But if she's operating with Kazan's guidance, he understood the implication. The Russian was skilled enough to help her evade standard surveillance. This added a concerning variable to the equation. Proceed with Kazan interception as planned, he instructed, but elevate alert status for unexpected contact. The parking structure was nearly empty at this late hour, its concrete levels illuminated by flickering fluorescent lights. From a concealed position on the level, he watched Kazan's approach through thermal imaging. The Russian moved with professional caution, checking potential ambush points, his body language revealing his awareness that he might be walking into a trap. Target approaching your position, Bishop confirmed through the earpiece. Perimeter security confirms no additional personnel in the structure. As Kazan rounded the corner, weapon already drawn, he stepped into view. Alexander, it's been a while. The Russian froze recognition and shock crossing his features before professional composure reasserted itself. Phoenix. I heard rumors you had gone civilian. Evidently exaggerated, he replied, evenly. You're working for Veronica Radcliffe now. Kazan didn't deny it. Business is business. She's paying well to find someone who destroyed her family. She's paying to find a ghost, he corrected. Silas Mercer no longer exists. Yet here you stand, Kazan observed, his weapon still raised. Why confront me directly? Not your usual approach. Professional courtesy, he replied. Walk away from this contract. Find other work. The Russian actually smiled. You know that's not how this functions. Once I accept a contract, you complete it or die trying, he finished. An admirable, if impractical code in this situation. Kazan's finger tensed slightly on the trigger. I've studied your methods, Phoenix. Your non-lethal preference. You're reluctant since going private. A preference isn't a limitation, he clarified, his posture unchanged despite the weapon aimed at him. Last chance, Alexander. Withdrawal. Instead of responding, Kazan fired. A move telegraphed microseconds before execution, allowing him to shift just enough that the bullet grazed his shoulder rather than striking center mass. His own response was immediate. A specialized projectile from a concealed weapon that deployed a localized electrical charge on impact. Kazan convulsed, his body temporarily overloaded by the neural disruption. Before the Russian could recover, he closed the distance, applying precise pressure to specific nerve clusters that ensured continued incapacitation. I warned you, he said calmly, securing Kazan's weapons. She'll find someone else. The Russian managed through gritted teeth. She's obsessed. I'm counting on it, he replied, injecting a specialized compound into Kazan's neck. Not lethal. The sedative would keep him unconscious, while the accompanying compounds ensured short-term memory disruption. As he secured the unconscious operative, his earpiece activated with Mara's urgent voice. Perimeter breach. Veronica has entered the structure. Lower level, moving up. This was unexpected. Kazan should have been operating independently, with Veronica safely distant from operational activities. Understood, he responded. Maintain position. I'll handle this. Dragging Kazan's unconscious form behind a concrete pillar, he moved toward the ramp connecting the levels. Through surveillance cameras accessed via his tactical interface, he watched Veronica ascending cautiously, a small handgun clutched inexpertly in her trembling hands. She was alone, either overconfident in Kazan's abilities or too focused on revenge to consider her personal safety. The woman who had navigated high society with calculated precision now moved with desperate determination. Her once perfect appearance replaced by utilitarian clothing and haunted eyes. He positioned himself at the top of the ramp, emerging into view as she reached the level. Hello, Veronica? She froze, gun raised wildly. Silas. She gasped, her voice hoarse with emotion. I found you. Evidently, he acknowledged. Though following Kazan was uncharacteristically reckless. He's a professional killer, not a tour guide. Where is he? She demanded, glancing around. Indisposed, he replied. And you're alone, holding a weapon you clearly don't know how to use properly, confronting someone you've spent millions trying to locate for revenge. You destroyed everything, she said, voice shaking with fury. My family, my life, my children's future. I exposed the truth, he corrected. The destruction was built into the lies you chose to live by. She steadied the gun with visible effort. I'm going to kill you. It won't bring anything back, but I'll have that at least. You won't, he stated with absolute certainty. Not just because that Beretta's safety is still engaged, or because your stance telegraphs every intention seconds before you act, but because killing me wouldn't change anything. You're wrong, she insisted, tears streaming down her face. It would change everything. How? He asked simply. Would Theodore be released from prison? Would Dominic's testimony be undone? Would the evidence of your family's crimes disappear? Would the children suddenly regain their privilege built on corruption? The gun wavered in her grip. They were just children. They didn't deserve to lose everything. They haven't lost everything, he replied evenly. They've lost excess and privilege built on lies. They still have resources for education, for building legitimate lives. They hate me, she whispered, raw anguish breaking through. Parker won't even speak to me. Faye just asks why I lied, why I chose Dominic, why everything had to be destroyed. Valid questions, he noted without sympathy. The same ones I asked myself when I discovered the truth. Her expression hardened again. You never loved me. Not really. No one who loves someone could do what you did. I loved who I thought you were, he corrected. A fiction you carefully constructed and maintained for 17 years. When that fiction dissolved, so did any obligation to protect your feelings or future. He took a step closer, noting how she tightened her grip on the weapon. The gun won't work, Veronica. Not just because you lack the training, But because I removed the firing pin while Kazan was storing it in your hotel room safe. Her eyes widened in shock. You've been watching me all along. Of course, he confirmed. Just as I watched Theodore's operations for months before acting. Just as I'll continue monitoring you to ensure this obsession doesn't endanger others. She lowered the useless weapon. Defeat finally overcoming rage. What happens now? You have a choice, he told her. Continue this self-destructive pursuit, spending what little resources you have left chasing someone who no longer exists, or accept reality and focus on rebuilding some semblance of a life. What life? She asked bitterly. There's nothing left. There's truth, he replied simply. For perhaps the time in your adult life, build from that if you're capable. He turned to leave, knowing the conversation was effectively over. Veronica's pursuit had been predictable, but ultimately futile. A last desperate attempt to regain some control over a situation that had irreversibly slipped from her grasp. This isn't over, she called after him, empty defiance in her voice. It was over the moment I discovered the truth, he replied without turning back. The rest has just been aftermath. As he disappeared into the shadows of the parking structure, surveillance systems confirmed Bishop's team moving in to collect. Both Kazan and Veronica, the Russian for transportation to a remote location, where he would awaken with strategically altered memories. Veronica for discreet return to her hotel with similar memory adjustments to blur the direct confrontation. Neither would remember the exact details of this encounter, but both would retain the essential message. Pursuing Phoenix was futile and potentially fatal. In the secure apartment overlooking Lake Geneva, Mara waited with updated intelligence on their primary mission. The trafficking network they had been preparing to dismantle. Kazan and Veronica situation contained? She asked as he entered. Completely, he confirmed. Neither will pursue further action after tonight's interventions. And the psychological impact? She pressed, seeing her again, after everything? He considered the question, analyzing his own emotional response with the same precision he applied to external threats. Negligible. She's a loose and now resolved, nothing more. Mara accepted this with a nod, knowing better than to press further. The Foundation Board has authorized full-spectrum response against the Watson network. Operations can commence at your command. He reviewed the operational details with renewed focus. The confrontation with his past already categorized and filed away. The Phoenix had fully emerged from the ashes of Silas Mercer's life, stronger and more purposeful than before. The betrayal that had destroyed his manufactured life had ultimately restored his true nature, calculating, relentless, and absolutely committed to balancing scales that others believed beyond reach. Initiate primary sequence, he instructed. Full spectrum deployment. As systems activated and operatives moved into position against their next target, he allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. The revenge against the Radcliffes had been personal, but what came next was something more significant. A mission that would continue long after particular vendettas had faded into history. The Phoenix had risen again, and this time, there would be no distractions from its purpose. Chapter 9, Ashes and Rebirth. 1 year to the day after exposing the Radcliffe Empire, Gabriel Shaw, formerly Silas Mercer, codenamed Phoenix, stood on the observation deck of Zurich's Prime Tower, watching the city lights illuminate as dusk settled. The Phoenix Foundation had established its covert headquarters here, operating behind multiple layers of legitimate businesses and security consultancies. Quarterly results exceed projections, Mara reported, joining him at the railing. 5 major operations dismantled. 18 high-value targets neutralized. Over 4,000 victims extracted and provided rehabilitation resources. Acceptable progress, he acknowledged. Status on the Montevideo situation? Bishop's team achieved full penetration of the network. Evidence packages delivered to 3 separate enforcement agencies. Coordinated raids scheduled for tomorrow morning. In the 12 months since leaving his old life behind, he had built something far more significant than the security consultancy that had once been his cover. The Phoenix Foundation now operated globally, identifying and systematically dismantling organizations similar to Theodore Radcliffe's predatory operations that exploited the vulnerable while hiding behind facades of legitimacy. The billions redirected from Radcliffe's hidden accounts funded an organization that could operate completely independent of governmental oversight or political interference. Their methods combined surgical precision with absolute commitment to exposure and justice. The monitoring reports on former Radcliffe associates arrived, Mara noted, offering a secure tablet. He reviewed the information with practiced efficiency. Theodore Radcliffe remained in federal prison, his health deteriorating rapidly under the strain of confinement. Dominic Walsh had attempted to secure early release through additional cooperation, only to have his petition denied when evidence packages anonymously delivered to prosecutors revealed his testimony had strategically omitted critical details. And Veronica, the quarterly surveillance confirmed she had finally abandoned her obsessive pursuit of revenge following the Geneva confrontation. Now working as an administrative assistant at a small real estate firm in Connecticut, she lived in a modest apartment, her former social circle completely closed to her. "The children?" he asked, scrolling through the report. "Parker dropped out of university permanently," Mara reported. "Currently working construction in Colorado," seemingly determined to distance himself from both his name and former life. "Faye continues at boarding school, academic performance exceptional. She's applied to medical programs, focusing on humanitarian medicine." He considered this information dispassionately. The different paths taken by the teenagers he had raised as his own represented the divergent responses to catastrophic truth. Parker rejecting everything associated with his former privilege, Faye channeling the disruption into productive ambition. Remove Parker from active monitoring, he decided. Maintain the educational trust for Faye, but increase the distance between foundation involvement and fund administration. "You're letting them go," Mauro observed. "They've become irrelevant variables," he replied. "Their choices no longer intersect with operational concerns." This wasn't entirely accurate. He recognized that maintaining surveillance on the children had been one of the few lingering connections to his former life. A habit rather than a necessity. Releasing them from monitoring represented the final severance of Silas Mercer's existence. His secure phone vibrated with an alert from the Foundation's automated tracking system. A familiar name had appeared in a financial transaction flagged for unusual characteristics. "Interesting," he noted, reviewing the details. "Lydia Chambers has reactivated dormant accounts connected to Radcliffe Holdings." Lydia, Veronica's former friend and confidant, had largely escaped the initial collapse, distancing herself quickly enough to avoid significant financial damage. This sudden activity suggested something had changed. "Worth investigating?" Mara asked. "Initiate preliminary surveillance," he directed. "Digital footprint only until we determine relevance." As the automated systems began tracking Lydia's activities, another alert appeared. This one from physical security monitoring Theodore Radcliffe's confinement. "Medical emergency reported at Radcliffe's facility," Mara noted, accessing the detailed information. "Apparent cardiac event. Critical condition." He absorbed this update without visible reaction. Theodore's death had been anticipated in their projections. The man was 72 with a history of cardiovascular issues exacerbated by the stress of imprisonment. "Maintain surveillance on all associated parties," he instructed. "Theodore's death will trigger response patterns among surviving network members." The sun had fully set now. Zurich's financial district transformed into a geometric pattern of illuminated windows and darkened spaces. From this height, the patterns resembled the complex network diagrams the Foundation used to map criminal organizations. Each light a node in an interconnected system. "We've received confirmation on the Watson network extraction," Mara reported. "All targeted victims secured. Rehabilitation protocols initiated." This represented the completion of their most recent major operation, dismantling a human trafficking ring that had operated behind a legitimate shipping company. Much as Theodore had hidden his criminal activities behind respectable banking operations. "Distribute the evidence packages to enforcement agencies tomorrow," he directed. "Ensure the financial tracking data reaches the specialized prosecutors in Hamburg." Mara nodded, making notes on her tablet. "There's one more item requiring your attention." She provided a separate secure device displaying surveillance photographs. Veronica entering a private medical facility in Manhattan, followed by images of her meeting with a distinguished-looking physician. "Oncology consultation," Mara explained. "Diagnosis confirmed through medical records. Advanced pancreatic cancer. Prognosis, terminal, estimated 6 to 8 months without aggressive intervention." He studied the images without comment, analyzing the unexpected data point and its potential implications for established operational parameters. Veronica appeared gaunt in the photographs. Her once perfect appearance now marked by the preliminary effects of both illness and treatment. "Relevance to current operations?" he asked. "Minimal direct impact," Mara assessed. "However, terminal diagnosis may trigger unpredictable behavior patterns. Recommend continued monitoring for potential destabilization." He considered this, weighing various scenarios against probability matrices. "Increase surveillance resolution, but maintain distance. No direct intervention unless operational security is threatened." The clinical detachment of his response was precisely calibrated. Neither vindictive satisfaction nor residual compassion influenced operational decisions. The woman who had betrayed him was now simply another variable in an equation. Her terminal illness a factor to be monitored, rather than a source of either pleasure or regret. His secure channel activated with an urgent communication from Bishop. Theodore Radcliffe confirmed deceased. Heart failure. Security protocols at detention facility indicate potential information breach during medical response. This development required immediate attention. Direct Bishop to implement containment protocols, he instructed Mara. Any information compromised during Theodore's medical emergency must be isolated and neutralized. As Mara relayed the instructions, he reviewed mental contingency scenarios developed months earlier for precisely this eventuality. Theodore's death had always carried the risk of exposing connections and information the old man had kept secure even during his downfall. Update on Lydia Chambers, Mara reported. Financial algorithms detect pattern consistent with preparations for relocation, significant assets being liquidated through non-standard channels. The convergence of these events, Theodore's death, Lydia's sudden financial activity, Veronica's terminal diagnosis, created a pattern that triggered his operative instincts. Not coincidence, but correlation. Full-spectrum monitoring on Chambers, he directed, and prepare the Geneva containment team for potential activation. You believe she's operating on Theodore's posthumous instructions, Mara observed. Not a question, but an assessment. Probable, he confirmed. Theodore would have established contingency protocols in the event of his death. Chambers was always the most insulated of his associates, positioned to survive the initial collapse. The implications were clear. Despite thorough dismantling of the Radcliffe empire, Theodore had maintained a final fail-safe, a mechanism triggered by his death that could potentially threaten the new life and mission Gabriel had constructed. Over the next 72 hours, Foundation resources confirmed the suspected pattern. Lydia Chambers had accessed hidden accounts connected to Theodore's most closely guarded operations. She had established contact with 3 former Radcliffe associates previously believed neutralized. And most concerning, surveillance detected her meeting with a private intelligence contractor known for specializing in identity location. They're looking for you again, Mara concluded, as they reviewed the accumulated evidence in the Foundation's Secure Operations Center, using Theodore's death as the trigger for a contingency plan. Expected, he noted, studying the complex data visualization displaying the emergent threat network. Theodore was always methodical. He would have prepared for his death, activating resources beyond our initial containment. The question wasn't whether to respond, but how completely. The Foundation's operational parameters emphasized proportional response and minimizing collateral impact. Yet this resurgent threat struck at the very core of the Foundation's security, his own continued anonymity. Options? He asked, though he had already calculated the most efficient approach. Standard containment would require individual neutralization of each activated asset, Mara analyzed. Time-consuming and creates potential for information leakage before completion. And non-standard options? She hesitated briefly. A comprehensive response targeting the central node would be more efficient, but exceeds normal operational guidelines. The central node, Lydia Chambers herself, the linchpin of Theodore's posthumous contingency, eliminating her would collapse the emergent threat network before it could fully activate. Prepare both standard and comprehensive response packages, he directed. Final decision pending additional intelligence. That intelligence arrived 12 hours later, through one of the Foundation's deep cover operatives embedded in Veronica's medical support team. During a pain medication-induced state of reduced inhibition, she had revealed critical information to her physician, information immediately flagged by surveillance algorithms. Mara provided the transcript. She told her doctor that Theo left instructions with Lydia. Find Silas, expose everything he's built, make him pay even after we're gone. The threat was no longer theoretical, but confirmed. Theodore's final act of vengeance, orchestrated from beyond the grave through Lydia Chambers, targeted not just Gabriel personally, but the Foundation itself. The mission he had built from the ashes of his former life. Implement comprehensive response, he decided. Full spectrum, no limitations. Within 24 hours, Foundation assets had mobilized globally. The operation proceeded with surgical precision. Lydia Chambers' sophisticated security was penetrated, her access to the activated Radcliffe resources severed, and the woman herself secured in a Foundation containment facility in the French Alps. Gabriel personally conducted the final interview, entering the secure room where Lydia sat composed despite her circumstances, her expression revealing calculation rather than fear. I wondered if you'd come yourself, she remarked, as he took the seat across from her. The great phoenix risen from Silas Mercer's ashes. Theodore's contingency plan, he stated without preamble. All details. Now, she smiled thinly, always so direct. That's what Veronica found most boring about you, you know, the complete lack of nuance. The plan, Lydia, he repeated, unmoved by the attempted provocation. Insurance, she replied simply. Theodore knew he might not survive to see his revenge completed, so he created a dead man's switch. Information packages to be delivered to specific recipients in the event of his death. Recipients, law enforcement, journalists, competitors, former associates who escaped your initial purge. She leaned forward. Everything Theodore knew or suspected about your current operations, your new identity, the foundation you've built on his stolen assets, most of which would be speculation rather than evidence, he noted. Enough to start unraveling the threads, she countered. Theodore was very thorough in his final months, surprisingly lucid despite his circumstances. He studied her with professional assessment. Lydia had always been the most dangerous of Veronica's inner circle, intelligent, calculating, and remarkably adept at self-preservation. That she had agreed to serve as Theodore's posthumous instrument of revenge suggested deeper connections than previously identified. The distribution mechanism? He asked. Already initiated, she replied with satisfaction. My detention triggered automated protocols. The information is being distributed as we speak. If true, this represented a significant security breach. Yet his expression remained impassive, betraying nothing of his internal calculations. A predictable contingency, he said finally. And neutralized before you arrived in this room. Now uncertainty flickered across her features. Impossible. The systems were designed with redundancies specifically anticipating your intervention. Indeed they were, he acknowledged. Sophisticated work, but fundamentally flawed in assuming our intelligence hadn't already mapped those redundancies months ago. This wasn't entirely accurate. The Foundation had discovered some, but not all of Theodore's contingency systems. However, psychological operations against high-value intelligence assets often required controlled deception. You're bluffing, Lydia decided after studying his expression. Some packages have already reached their destinations. Possible, he conceded, but irrelevant. Any recipient of Theodore's information packages has simultaneously received alternative documentation establishing clear motivations for the Foundation's work. The narrative has been preemptively controlled. This was true. Foundation protocols for high-risk exposure scenarios included comprehensive countermeasure packages deployed to neutralize potential threats before they materialized. Theodore's posthumous revenge had been anticipated and prepared for long before his death. What happens to me now? Lydia asked, her composure finally showing cracks. I assume retirement isn't an option. You have choices, he replied. Cooperation with complete disclosure of all remaining Ratcliffe assets and operations, followed by relocation with monitoring or resistance, followed by more permanent containment. Relocation where? A location where your particular skills can be constructively applied under Foundation supervision, he explained. Your intelligence is a resource that can be redirected rather than wasted. She considered this, the calculation visible in her expression. Veronica's dying, you know. The cancer is aggressive. Doctors give her months at most. I'm aware, he replied evenly. Does that satisfy you? She pressed, watching her die alone, stripped of everything. While you build your new empire? Her circumstances are a consequence of her choices, he stated, not a source of either satisfaction or regret. Lydia studied him with newfound assessment. You really have excised everything human, haven't you? The perfect phoenix burned away all weakness and sentiment. Not excised, he corrected. Channeled, the Foundation's work has helped thousands escape exploitation similar to what Theodore practiced. My personal history simply provides motivation for something larger. This represented perhaps the most significant evolution since his transformation from Silas Mercer to Gabriel Shaw. The redirection of personal betrayal into systematic justice on a global scale. The Foundation's operations against trafficking networks, financial exploitation schemes, and corruption had become his legacy rather than mere revenge. I'll cooperate, Lydia decided finally. Not out of fear, but curiosity. I want to see what you're building that was worth destroying everything you had. A pragmatic choice, he acknowledged, standing to leave. Debriefing will begin immediately. As he exited the containment facility, Mara waited with updated intelligence from multiple operations now in progress across 3 continents. The Foundation continued its work uninterrupted, the Theodore contingency effectively contained. Veronica's condition has deteriorated, Mara noted as they prepared to depart. Medical assessment indicates accelerated timeline, weeks rather than months. He absorbed this information without visible reaction. Continue monitoring until confirmation of termination, then archive all Radcliffe-related surveillance. Case closed. The helicopter lifted off, carrying them back towards Zurich and Foundation headquarters. Below, the alpine landscape stretched magnificent and indifferent, much like the perspective Gabriel had cultivated since rising from the ashes of Silas Mercer's destroyed life. 3 weeks later, the final notification arrived. Veronica Radcliffe Mercer, deceased. The report included details of her final days alone except for medical staff, her children having visited briefly but departed before the end. No funeral arrangements beyond basic cremation, no obituary beyond mandatory death records. The dynasty Theodore Radcliffe had built through exploitation and deception had ended not with dramatic justice but quiet erasure, financial empire dismantled. Family legacy destroyed, even his daughter's death passing without acknowledgement in the society she had once navigated as royalty. In his private office overlooking Zurich, Gabriel reviewed the report with clinical detachment, then authorized its transfer to permanent secure archives. The Radcliffe case was officially closed, the threat neutralized, the revenge complete beyond even his original design. Mara entered with updates on current operations, the Foundation's real work, continuing without interruption. The Jakarta extraction was successful. 32 victims secured. Rehabilitation protocols initiated. Excellent, he acknowledged. And the financial tracking? Algorithms have identified the primary controllers. Bishop's team is preparing evidence packages for distribution to enforcement agencies. As they reviewed operational details, Gabriel's secure communication system activated with an alert from the Foundation's monitoring of global intelligence channels. A pattern had emerged involving coordinated investigations into corruption networks across multiple jurisdictions, investigations that paralleled the Foundation's own targets without directly intersecting their operations. Interesting, he noted, studying the pattern. Someone else is hunting similar prey, using different methodologies but achieving aligned results. This represented potential competition, collaboration, or conflict, variables to be assessed and incorporated into operational planning. The Foundation's work would continue, evolving to address new threats and opportunities in the global landscape of exploitation and justice. The Phoenix had risen from personal betrayal to something far more significant, a force for systematic correction of injustices beyond the reach of conventional authorities. The revenge that had begun with exposing Theodore Radcliffe's crimes had transformed into a mission that would continue long after the original betrayers had been reduced to archive entries. Gabriel Shaw closed the Radcliffe file permanently and turned his full attention to the Foundation's current operations. The past was settled. The future awaited. The Phoenix would continue to rise again and again for as long as necessary. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. Take care, good luck.
After listening to today's story, perhaps it has raised some new questions in your mind, or maybe it has brought back some old memories. Every day on Reddit, new experiences and moments create fresh stories, and they connect all of us. Everyone has their own unique journey in life, and we all try to understand the world in our own way. These kinds of moments remind us that we are all human, sometimes happy, sometimes sad, and always learning something new. If you enjoyed this story, feel free to share it with your friends. Your thoughts and feedback are always valuable to us, as they motivate us to create even better content. Every story has its own unique angle, and our goal is to understand everyone's perspective and make our content diverse and relatable. Stories like these help us realize that life's journey is different for everyone, and by hearing other stories, we learn something new. You can also share your own stories with us. Your experiences are valuable to us as well, and if you enjoyed this video, please leave your feedback. We aim to create content that brightens your mind and gives you new ideas every time. If you've already seen this video before, your feedback is still important. With every piece of feedback, we can improve our content and bring a new perspective to our viewers. Today, what we saw was just a small part of the many stories shared on Reddit and across the world. It's a reminder of how we all try to understand life by sharing our experiences with each other. This video was only an example of how we try to connect with others through storytelling, learning about different sides of life. We hope to continue sharing such stories that help us all learn and grow together. Thank you for your time, and don't forget to keep an eye out for more stories coming soon. If you haven't already, please like and follow for more amazing content. Your support keeps us going, and we will strive to bring you more thought-provoking and heartwarming stories. Until next time, take care and stay curious. **